Welcome to episode 47 of the AMT podcast. A bit of an aimless episode this time. Just want to give you guys an update as to what I'm up to currently on the trading front and just give my thoughts on the past weekend's action. So we'll start with the weekend, the highlight being the 5 versus 5 Queensberry versus Matchroom in the boxing. Now, even though Eddie Hearn got absolutely pasted 5-0 or 10-0, if you include the points, there were some great, really high quality matchups. Now, I was in two minds about doing previews for the fights, but I didn't bother since the fights were really hard to call. There were some really evenly matched fights. And it was the same case with Jack Catterall versus Josh Taylor the weekend before. Now, I did end up tipping Jack Catterall to my Telegram members on the afternoon of the fight because his price ended up drifting, I think, 20 ticks to around even. So I thought that was great value. So I ended up backing Jack Catterall. But for this weekend, it was just too hard to call. Now, gun to my head, I would have got the last 3 fights right. The only fight I would have got wrong had I backed him was Craig Richardson, who ended up losing to Willie Hutchinson. But I'm running hot on my boxing picks right now. My only loser this year was backing Devin Haney to beat Ryan Garcia on points. But yeah, it was a clean sweep on the betting front. Now, granted, I was using smaller stakes, but liquidity was 10 times lower than the Fury versus Usyk fight, which is a real shame when you consider the fact that this was a much higher quality card. You know, Fury is such a big name. He can carry a pay-per-view all by himself. You know, promoters don't need to beef up the preliminary fights. They can skimp over there because, you know, Fury's name is just box office. But this 5 versus 5 concept should be part of the future of boxing. In fact, on the back of the success on the weekend, Top Rank and Golden Boy are in talks of doing a similar 5 versus 5. You know, I don't remember ever seeing so much quality in one night. The only place you see these kind of high quality matchups is in the UFC, where you get at least 2 or 3 high level fights. Boxing, you get the world title fight, and then you could just get some junk in between usually. But if we can see this 5 versus 5 thing regularly, you know, every few months, where the cream of the crop in each promotional stable face off with each other, I think it's going to go a long way in putting boxing back to number 1 in terms of pay-per-view for combat sports. And I'm more than happy to pay for it. And as far as the fights were concerned, the key takeaways for me is that Hamza Shiraz, I think, is definitely the number 1 prospect in Great Britain right now. It's actually the first time I've seen him fight, and there was a lot of clean work. He dictates the pace well. He's got a world-class jab. And he's freakishly tall, especially for an Asian. But most importantly, he's got a good head on his shoulders. You know, he plots his way around. Even outside the ring, he's very humble. He thinks about his answers. And I think he's on the cusp of a world title shot. So he's a fighter I'm definitely looking forward to betting on in the future. As for Daniel Dubois, a phenomenal win in what was a high-pressure fight. A fight that pretty much hinges on whether or not we can ever consider him a world-class fighter. Now, Filip Hrgović was very condescending and even arrogant during the build-up. I think he even vowed to retire if Daniel Dubois beats him. So we'll see if he sticks with that. Now, he is a world-level fighter. He's certainly more technically sound than Daniel Dubois. But as is typical with Eastern European fighters, they're class operators, but they're just a promoter's nightmare. They're very square, not much charisma. They don't say much. Now, granted, Dubois doesn't talk a lot either. You know, he's got that Anthony Joshua-like action man physique. And the fact that he's from Britain, it's going to be very easy to generate interest, especially for a domestic dust-up between him and the likes of Anthony Joshua, which, by the way, is in the talks now. And I'll definitely be doing a preview for that fight when and if it happens. And finally, it was Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang, a proper heavyweight blockbuster scrap to close out the evening. Now, there was absolutely no way this fight was going 12 rounds. In fact, to not go the distance was trading around 1.2 on the exchange. So the market was spot on. 2 limited technical fighters, massive punches. It was just a question of who lands first. And Zhang did just that. You know, he closed the distance, he beat him up, and then he ironed him out in the 5th round. And that's likely the end of Wilder's career, in my opinion. You know, that's back-to-back defeats now. And it's sad that we'll never see Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder. But at the end of the day, if we're telling the truth, I think Deontay Wilder is the most overrated fighter of this era. He's literally beaten no world champions unless you count Bermane Stiverne. Every time he's faced a world level fighter, he's been battered. Yes, he was exciting. You know, he had genuine knockout power in his right hand. But the fact that he had 10 title defenses against cab drivers, and that's enough to potentially put him in the boxing Hall of Fame with the likes of Muhammad Ali, tells you all you need to know about the lower barriers to entry for American fighters. Other than the boxing, I only dabbled in Epsom, but we closed out the weekend with a nice back on Robert McIntyre to win the Canadian Open in the golf at 2.04, and I did tip that on Twitter, by the way. So I hope you jumped on for that one, because I rarely post tips on Twitter anymore, and when I do, I don't miss. But speaking of tipping, I have in fact closed my Telegram group for good. It was a hard decision. I have some loyal members in there, and people really enjoy and appreciate the value that I constantly put out. But after some hard thinking, it was the right thing to do, at least for now, because I'm at a stage now with my trading, and I'm talking just about racing, where things have gone a little bit stale. Whilst I have very good track knowledge and I'm good at reading a race in play, I did spend a good few months last year refining my track knowledge and race reading ability, but it's paid very little dividend. Now, a lot of people would be comfortable making the steady income that I have done for so long off racing, but given the effort I've put in and knowing how much I'm leaving on the table, I really want to get the most out of what I do. So for racing, I've gone back to the drawing board, and I'm now taking a more data-driven approach. Shutting the Telegram group down means, I don't have that pressure of having to trade every day to make sure that people are getting their money's worth. Now I can take time off and I can own my time once again and really knuckle down and dedicate at least 2 to 3 hours every day digging through data and learning how to analyze it. 2 years ago on this podcast, I did a video on whether or not you need to be data driven in order to be a profitable trader or gambler. And whilst there's no right or wrong answer to the question, I used to pride myself on the fact that I never had to dig through data in order to gain an edge. All I did was just watch race after race and learn how to read the charts in order to spot patterns. Whilst that served me well for such a long time in racing, I'm now left with no choice but to look at the data in order to anticipate moves before they happen and capture those bigger moves in play. When you spent so long doing things one kind of way, it's hard to go back to the drawing board and feel like a student again. It's easy for pride to get in the way, but there can be no ego when it comes to improving and making more money. Sometimes you have to take a step back in order to go too forward. And while some of the stuff I'm learning right now may be elementary to the data guys, it's better late than never. And if anything, the patience and grit required in order to make sense of the data is already there, because I remember what it was like when I started trading and absolutely nothing made sense for so long. But day after day, month after month, with a sustained effort, the pieces eventually begin to fall in place. So I already have that patience and grit to see out the early part of the learning curve, which is the hardest. But what's even funnier and somewhat ironic, actually, is that the methods you need to learn in order to analyze data, I'm talking about the Excel formulas, the VBA and financial modeling. I actually learnt a lot of that at uni because I studied investment and financial risk management. And I used to laugh about the fact that I'm never going to need any of it. So it's kind of funny how things have come full circle, because I'm now spending hours every day relearning it all. Now, thankfully, technology's come a long way since I graduated. So I am leveraging applications like ChatGPT where possible. But ultimately, the goal is to comb through the data, filter it, figure out some angles which aren't obvious to the naked eye, being a manual trader, and then automate the strategies and scale it up as aggressively as the market will allow me to. And that will free up a lot of time for me to focus on other things and bet on sports that, I might be more passionate about and have a knack for picking winners frequently, like boxing or golf, where I don't even need data. I think I have a near 90% hit rate on boxing picks. The only sub-evens price picks that have lost was Devin Haney on points versus Garcia, like I said earlier, this year, and last year, Chris Eubank Jr. to beat Liam Smith. Those are the only two prices I've backed in recent years that I've lost, that were under evens. But having participated in both sports, also that it helps give you a natural ability to read the state of play. And the data would just be a hindrance to my natural edge, which I just don't have in a sport like racing. In boxing, you have to pay just as much attention to the build-up as you do to the fight, whereas that psychological warfare doesn't exist in a sport like horse racing, where the horses are creatures of habit. So if you can build a database of horses who run the same way at the same tracks and they trade within a similar range. You can build a pattern and automate systems, which, like I said, frees up my time to do other things. So it's not an easy route. It's just about working smarter, not harder. It's about working on things which are going to move the needle. And like I said, last year, I thought improving my track knowledge or in play reading ability is going to do that. And that wasn't the case. And, there's nothing noble or honorable about working like a donkey. I feel like I've done that for long enough already. And whilst it served me well up until now, I know I'm capable of doing more. As you guys know, I'm always transparent about my progress and what I get up to. So I have no idea, when or even if things are going to work out. Obviously, I believe it will. Otherwise, I wouldn't be trying it. But yeah, I'm willing to give it a go. And right now, I'm just working flat out. It has cost me my Telegram. And, like I said, something has to give. Sometimes you got to take that step back in order to go too forward. But rest assured, I will be sharing my progress on things when that does happen. Anyway, just a short one today. Don't forget to comment. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share where possible, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.